Good morning, wine world, and welcome to another virtual release of Silicon Valley Bank's annual direct-to-consumer survey results and benchmarks. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we begin. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. To turn off the closed captioning feature, click the live transcript button below. The chat function has been disabled, but please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A below. I'd now like to introduce our panel for today. Aileen Sevier, VP of Strategy and Marketing from Early Mountain Winery in Virginia. This is our first Virginia participant in the panel. Janiene Ullrich, EVP of Direct to Consumer from the family Coppola. Paul Mabray, who I call Dr. Digital. He's the CEO of Pix. And of course, I'm your host, Rob McMillan, EVP and founder of Silicon Valley Bank's wine division. I just had my script disappear. There we go. First today, a public service announcement. Thank you to those who took the survey this year. We ended up with 460 wineries fully completing the survey. And while grateful, I have to note that we were only 10 surveys above the minimum participation rate, that's hard to say, to get to a 95% confidence interval. And we weren't able to produce metrics for a few regions who have had those produced in the past because they fell below statistical significance. So please do what you can to, and we have over 1,500 participants in the webinar today, but only 460 wineries that participated in the survey. So I appreciate anything you guys can do to boost those numbers when we do our 2 surveys a year. But now to the content. 2020 represented the most difficult business conditions since Prohibition. Pandemic and fires. That's I kept thinking that we were going to, get by it, and then something else would come up. It just was a never-ending stream of difficulties. The pandemic closed restaurants and tasting rooms, which at the time represented about 44% of sales for the average family winery. So we were all in shock. Consumers were hoarding toilet paper and wine in the grocery stores, which, by the way, is something you can use in your next trivia game. How are toilet paper and wine alike during the pandemic? I don't think anybody will get that. Heidi, can we bring up slide 6? There we go. So how did we get out of this? Well, small wineries put on their boots. Zoom tastings, which really didn't exist before, became a thing. The clubs, especially in the spring, did very, very well. And which kind of, I think, surprised a lot of us, because that's not the experience we normally have in a recession. Online sales took off. You can see in this chart here, this is direct consumer. Pardon me, direct. This is just the direct side. So forgetting the wholesale on or off premise, just pulling out that big blue circle and going to the right, you can see that. Where did we go to? Internet web, 16.2% of direct sales. Phone sales, that became a thing. If you had done a good job and maintained your client lists, then phone sales were useful for you. Email marketing was used.
I think we broke up a little bit with you, Rob, but yeah, email marketing really picked up significantly this year, as you guys can see. Janiene and Aileen, how much was your internet improved over the last year?
Oh, we were very grateful for our online
Tasting
sales.
model.
Oh,
and take the experience on the road.
You were back again. You were out for a second there, Rob, just so you know. So
yeah. Well, then let's do this and move straight to the content. And I think Janiene, I think you had a slide that you wanted to see, and I'm going to go offline for a second and switch my internet out. So Janiene, can you bring up the slide you wanted to talk about, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, I believe it was slide 5 that shows the changes over the years.
Well, while you're doing that, can you finish your thought on the e-commerce, both of you? I think it's a pretty big thought about what happened with both of your businesses, why Rob switches out.
Yeah, we definitely, like many other wineries, saw a big surge in online sales in 2020. Started late March. April was a pretty big shift, and then continued through the rest of the year. And for us, we didn't know this was going to happen. Trust me, I do not have a crystal ball, but we did revamp our online shopping experience at the end of 2019, as well as put in some other analytic components into our backend system, which thank God we had done that, because otherwise we would not have been prepared for this organic surge that happened because of the pandemic. And I know Aileen saw similar things in her business.
Better be lucky than good. Better be good and lucky together, Janiene, like you are. So on that, Aileen, yeah.
I think going back to slide 6 quickly, what this pie chart leaves out is where a lot of wineries started. And so we were at about 4% online if you looked at our proportion of total, and then grew to about 20% in 2020. So just a really extreme shift that I know a lot of wineries experienced.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's move on to your slide, Janiene. Thank you for sharing that. Those are great. I mean, I think we've all known about the hope of the internet, and I think we've seen it for the first time as a result of the pandemic. So,
well, I guess I'm back, which is good news. And sorry, technical stuff. That's what we got to deal with today. The internet thing, I think, is something we got to just linger on for a few minutes if we can, because this is kind of a turning point for the industry in my mind. We've been talking about internet sales forever and ever and ever, and one of the things that happened, matter of fact, we can go to slide 5 for a second if we can, Heidi. So this is the trended composition. Pix was the one that put this slide together, so thanks to them for doing that. Trended composition of DTC sales. What you can see in here, the red bar is tasting room and the orange bar is club. So over time, you can see the growing importance of club. And at the same time, you can see, what's happened with tasting room. Now, obviously, the last part of that is due to the closing of tasting rooms and restricted openings. But at the same time, look at that yellow bar at the bottom. Internet, which was just kind of hovering at a reasonably small level of participation as it relates to direct-to-consumer sales, anyways, bumped up to 16%. Now, the question to me is, what happens next? And we got a lot of questions from the registrants about, what's it going to be like when we get back to normal, whatever normal becomes. And I think Paul and I have a little bit of a disagreement, as a matter of fact, on this, because I think that we're likely to drop back down. And let me tell you why. From 16% to something less, and I'll tell you why. Is because that 16%, that growth, that movement, that was passive. It's not that the industry became experts in e-commerce sales all of a sudden. It's because we had shopping carts. That was it. There was a lot of stuff that we truly were not doing, and I think some of the other slides that we have will probably bring some of that forward. But unless we make those investments in internet sales and actually doing e-commerce, then there's every reason to believe that 16% probably will drop. But I think you might have had a disagreement with me, Paul.
I completely disagree with you, my friend. You know what? Those were passive sales, but at the same time, everyone has started to see the benefits of this boon of sales and start to invest in the channel. I was just at Gloria Ferrar yesterday. They have 2 digital people talking about A/B testing. A year ago, you would have never heard that from a winery, to be honest with you. So the genie's out of the bottle. We're going to keep continuing to invest in it. And these experts are these people that are getting, knowledge and understanding of how to do a better job are going to spread through the industry and share that knowledge over and over again. So it's keeping up with the Joneses, it's system improvements, it's all the stuff. Yeah, it might dip a little bit this year, but it's going to keep going up after that. I mean, the reality is every single winery, from a boutique winery to the large winery, is investing in the channel. Aileen to Janiene are investing in digital, and they can talk about it better than I can. Please tell us what you guys are doing. I'd love to hear.
Well, Rob, I have to disagree that they were passive sales, because I know how hard we work to get that volume of sale. And if we go to slide 7, virtual tastings certainly took.
I obviously picked the wrong panel because you're wrong. You guys are disagreeing.
But Aileen, passive sales, just so you know, what Rob means by those is people were coming to the winery's website and buying, or they're mining their own list. They weren't going and getting a brand new customer in a different place, just so you know. That's what he means.
Yeah, but I guess the way we used virtual tastings, and one of the ways I feel like we came out of the pandemic stronger because of them, we're partnering with other wineries, other brands, getting into their consumer set, and really spreading the word about both what we're doing at Early Mountain and Virginia Wine on a whole. And so we really used this mechanism to both tell our story directly to people from the leadership, but a lot of them were new consumers for us. And this was such a powerful way to reach them in a very organic and inexpensive way.
Aileen, you had a really cool stat that you shared with us yesterday about the number of consumers that you reached through the virtual tastings. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, so in total in 2020, we reached 85,000 consumers. And that was through everything from, Dave McIntyre at the Washington Post using one of our wines in a virtual tasting with Coravin, to us partnering with other wineries and doing big social media tastings, to private corporate tastings. So 85,000 people in 1 year, when typically we'll have somewhere between 35 and 40,000 walk through our door. So, we're really able to access this very broad consumer group through them.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about what Aileen shared about virtual tastings, I don't think this is a question that came up several times through our Q&As. Will virtual tastings go away? And I don't think it will maybe continue at the same pace, but I think it's definitely shown to be a great supplemental activity. I think in terms of corporate opportunities, that's going to be there for a while before businesses are ready to send people out on business travel, arrange large conventions. We don't know what the private event business is going to look like for quite some time as we go through different regulations. And so I think virtual tastings for people that went out and did it, I think it's great. I think it was a good experiment. To be honest, I don't know how long it would have taken us to move towards that had it not been for the pandemic. So it kind of forced our hand, but it showed us different ways that it could be really successful with corporate tastings. And then also, we've talked a lot in the industry about how do you engage people once they're not on property or if they're out of state. And we also we didn't just do virtual tastings, but we had a paint night that we used to do on site, and we moved that into a virtual experience. And over half of our registrants were out of state. So I think virtual tastings are here to stay, maybe not at the same level, but I think it's a great supplement to keep in your business model as different things will come up.
Yeah, I agree with you guys on that. One of the things that we've talked about at Silicon Valley Bank now for, I'm going to say at least 5 years, is we needed to break away from the tasting room model. I think I was quoted as saying the tasting room model is broken, and I did say that. And it wasn't completely broken. Of course, it's still a totally viable source of revenue, but we were overly dependent on it. We were on rails, just kind of stuck in the dirt for family wineries, anyways. That people that didn't have 3-tier distribution. Tasting room, that was it. And we really did need to move away from it, and yet we kept sticking with what we knew, and I've always felt that we just need to take the experience on the road. That's the term that I always have used now for at least the last 5 years. We have to take the experience on the road. As a matter of fact, I was talking about digital tastings when it was Skype. I called them Skype tastings, but that was before Google took over Skype. So it's been that long that we've been talking about that. And the reality is nobody really. There's a few people that gave it a try, and the start that we got to Zoom tastings was pretty weak. It was. And it was people, it was like an owner sitting with a winemaker in a tasting room, and with with kind of ashen face saying, "Hi, this is a glass of wine." I mean, and then it became, "Hey, maybe we can sell wine," and maybe you start thinking through all the things and Paul used to talk about. How did you say it, Paul? Failing
forward. Yes.
Failing forward. Yeah, and that was an opportunity to just try something and fail, and I'm so proud of the industry for adopting. At the time, there were when we started doing these tastings, there were a lot of there's a lot of chatter, posts and blogs and such of what a waste of time it was. And I totally disagree. I think that this is one way and one path to where we need to go as an industry. We talk about omni-channel, I think, and in some form or fashion, we have to get to that point where we're addressing the consumer, the changed consumer, the consumer now that is working from home and having dinner at home at 5 o'clock even. We've got to figure out how to address that consumer through all of the different channels and not have them come to our tasting room, not have them, as we've said, be the person that insists that you have to go to Detroit to pick up your car or go to wine country to pick up your wine. Doesn't make any sense in a digital world, right? And we've changed. So what's going to happen with Zoom tastings? I think we'll go through a certain hiatus myself as we all kind of reject Zoom for a while, but I think they're here to stay.
I can tell you that it makes people rationalize their business travel more. I just saw on CNN and Airbnb talking about how you have to consider the cost structure of putting someone on a plane and a hotel to go do that. So that's going to be something that's going to stick around. I think what you're speaking to the larger trend, I think Aileen really hit on it, which is our job is to reach customers far and wide, not just the ones that come to the tasting room. And the digital is that fundamental tool. And we were able to see this usage of it, whether it's a Zoom tasting or social media, whether it was email marketing or text messaging, or, all of those things just represent our need to touch more consumers besides the people that come to our tasting room.
Mm-hmm. I think we'd be remiss, we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend here. So I know a lot of our fellow wineries are gearing up for people coming back on property. So it might be a good time to talk about, I think it was slide 4, where we talked about walk-ins versus reservations. Yeah, and this has been really, I know this has come up as a topic in previous webinars before the pandemic hit. Just this question on does it make sense to turn away from that walk-in business versus appointment? We did experiment with that before the pandemic with trying different seated tastings at higher price kind of entry levels, and we did find that model was proving to work really well for us in terms of selling wine and kind of getting that kind of ROI. I think the thing that we're all struggling with right now is the hospitality hiring abilities and capabilities right now. I think we're all facing a hard time trying to fill those much needed frontline positions. And so I think the by appointment model is part of it's going to be necessity for our wineries as we're struggling with hiring people. We can't just hire with the assumption that we'll get X amount of people walking in. We need to be prepared to handle that.
It's a really excellent point, Janiene, because by appointment actually gives some level of certainty to staffing, right? So when you're on the other side and you're trying to figure out how many people you need to deal with the people that are walking in, you're better able to staff, and you're better able to make sure that those people are functional. And by the way, for what it's worth, we don't have any slides up. I have this in a separate slide deck, but the hiring thing is going to be an issue for a while. And the Federal Reserve has already said that what they're trying to do is keep rates lower longer, so that lower scale, lower paid workers in particular get a boost in this recovery. So that's the goal, and especially with hospitality, we're in a competition for staffing. I think if you're in this hospitality business, that when things shut down, people didn't just, stay at their home and wait for the phone to ring and say, oh, the winery's open. They moved in with family. They moved out of town. They went and got jobs and other, a lot of people moved to construction. That was one of the things that happened. Some people went back to school, and you just can't pick up the phone again. One of the other problems that we're suffering from right this second is kind of a herky-jerky restart. For example, one of the hotels in town, where I live in Napa, they're not able to fully open. Normally they have something like 21 housekeepers, and today they can only find 8. So that limits how many people you can bring in. And if you start to look at some of the data that I see, some things are flattening out, but I think that's very, very temporary. I still think that we're going to have a very good reopening probably this year, into next. But labor's, yeah, it's definitely an issue.
I think another consideration too is the experience on both the consumer side as well as the employee side. So as a customer, are you really comfortable going back to that walk-up tasting bar model? And as a frontline employee, are you comfortable with not knowing how many people are going to come through the door? So I think that's something else that different wineries will need to consider as they move forward.
Yeah, I've had pushback from many directions, even this week, from people that say, no, we can't give up walk-in. We can't give up walk-in. And there's a place for walk-in, but back up for a second and think about how a lot of consumers get to you. It's how you market to them. And Paul's going to have, I'm sure, something to say about it. Search engine optimization and thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. So it's, you have a phone number. It's in the yellow pages. That's, the consumers, they go on the interwebs, and they're able to find you with their phones. And they're looking for you, and they walk in the door. Very different from somebody cruising up and down and think, oh, I'm just going to stop in here. They don't know what you offer. They don't really have a good idea about your pricing. So you may not have the right fit unless you do that front end. But for me personally, I think the walk-in is the most difficult, because you don't know the consumer, and even more so, you haven't collected the upfront data information, phone numbers, address, email address, etc. And collecting those for a walk-in is far more difficult.
Let's ask the macro effects of this. I mean, honestly, this is a change that's been happening for some time in Napa and Sonoma. And wherever they go, it just trends through the rest of the industry. What do you guys think? Is this going to continue to grow as a more and more appointment only? You think that's going to be a forever growth trend, Aileen and Janiene?
Yeah, here in Virginia, we'd been predominantly walk-in for tastings, and there were a limited number of wineries that would do appointment. And what we learned from COVID was, if we get customers into their seats, if we get them to the table, and we were doing flights entirely tableside, self-led, they spend a lot more. Right. And we have a lot more data. We know where they're coming from. We know where we want to spend our scant marketing budget. And so as we are now in a period of going back to led tastings, the management team all looked at each other and said, why would we ever go back to doing it that way? So we're planning to open with reservation only. And if you pull up the slide, Rob, that you created from the question.
24.
24. This is so powerful, looking at the club conversion rates for appointment only versus being just fully walk-in, or even a hybrid model. Mm-hmm. And so the stats definitely back up, pre-qualifying the customer, having more data to be able to continue the conversation with them and continue email marketing and selling wine to them online, and getting them, most importantly, into the club, because that's where I know there's been a lot of treading water over the last year for many wineries.
I think in terms of, this is a great slide showing getting the signups on the club side, but I also wonder what that experience has to do with keeping your club members happy. So if you're at a place where you index highly in the walk-in experience with a lot of people coming up to the bar, and then you have your trusted club members coming in, that could be a tough thing to navigate for them. And then maybe they feel overlooked or doesn't feel like a great experience. So I think in terms of signing them up initially, it's great to move towards that reservation model or lean more over towards that side. But I think in terms of keeping them happy and keeping them in your club, I think that's also a good tool to have.
Like the walk-up bar is a vestige of a long gone era, or the general walk-in, and it generally is a lagging of like industries that haven't matured as much, or older wineries, trying to target a younger audience sometimes too, believing that actually gets a younger audience versus everyone likes an experience, Janiene, like you said before, and the sit down is an experience, right? Whereas bellying up to a bar is not the same thing. It's not an experience anymore. That's not as intimate and special.
No, I think I mentioned that to you yesterday. I didn't even like doing that before COVID, and I definitely personally wouldn't want to do that now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the last thing anybody wants in if you're in a tasting bar that's a walk-in, is to get somebody that comes in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? It's their fourth tasting on their way out of town, and it's unlikely. If they've already if they signed up, then they might walk in. But if they're walking out of town, they probably already had enough. They've already shelled out their money, and you're going to spend a lot of time, and you may not have the right consumer.
Well, look at slide 15 as an example. I mean, you can see all of the major regions are trending there, right? Or really good. This slide speaks to that growth, and speaks to every industry's view on sit down tastings or by appointment only as well. But I think the growth is always on the upward curve, and if you look year over year, it just keeps going this way.
So to look at this slide, it's a little hard to read, but the left two bars are walk-in, 19 to 21, and the right two bars are by appointment, 19 to 21. So you can see that the decline in walk-in and the uptick by region. Now Napa County is largely been mandated to be by appointment county for quite some time, and so they've kind of led that trend. But the upside of by appointment is unquestionable, and whether our customers in Oregon or Washington, anywhere I've talked to, I think the die's been cast now. Now that people have actually gone to this. And going back to 24 for a second, I think it's probably worth looking one more time at this one in the middle that says both. And so, it's not a nice linear trend from open to the public and by appointment here. And just to underscore this, appointment only is almost 2x what open to the public is in terms of conversion rate, right? And so both is not that much off of open to the public, and I think it probably has to do with the difference in focus. It's if you're open to the public, but if you want to make an appointment, you can. It's just a lack of, I think, management focus on that other model, which is far more about holding hands when they walk in.
One other point though, Rob, that you've made in many of these webinars is having a range of experiences and be thinking about consumers at every point in their discovery of wine. And so I do think it's important to point out, while our tastings were going to appointment only, we have a wide range of experiences, including these totally self-led tastings that folks can enjoy on kind of a back lawn, very casual setting. And so not just going to this very formal, very, might be a bit intimidating for some consumers, but having that range of experience.
Let's shift gears for a second and talk about email. It's, how boring is that? but
Not for us.
Not at all.
yeah,
Amy and I talk about that all day long.
you know, we got some, I think, some pretty good slides in the deck about that. Let's look at 12. I'm just kind of interested to hear your guys' point of view about some of these email slides.
Janiene, go first on this one, please.
Yes, I mean, we've employed email marketing for quite some time, and it's something that's really interesting because you're never done. You never find the magic sauce, and then that's it. You always have to keep up on it. And so we do email frequently, and in the past, and I believe Aileen had commented yesterday, the similar feedback we get from internally from our group, just the worry about over communicating to people who are getting club notifications, shipment notifications, expired credit card. And so having the tools in place that allow you to properly segment your email marketing, so you're not sending the exact same message to your list multiple times, is definitely a big benefit. So if you are in the market looking for an email service provider, it is nice to have something where you can prioritize who gets what message. Because I think for us, and Aileen has a good examples too, we do a combination of some automatic emails that go out based on the customer's behavior versus when we want to push out a new release or new promotion. And I think that's a really powerful combination to have in your toolkit.
Yeah, I think the segmentation and having the additional integration with your different systems. So as we're getting folks coming in to, make a reservation for our restaurant, being able to give them the chance to opt into emails as they're going to our website, continuing to gather and build the list, and then keeping that segmentation happening. I mean, we compared notes yesterday, and we each email about 3 times a week, but to very different lists with different messages so that we're not bombarding folks. And we really upped our frequency, especially at the start of COVID, where there was so much to communicate. And we saw our open rates go through the roof. I mean, people were really looking to engage with wine. We tried to provide a lot of rich content and videos and recipes and anything we could think of to give them really rich content. And then, of course, did the ask of, yes, and this wine's releasing if you'd like to purchase it. And by far, about 2/3 of our online sales came directly from email marketing. So it was by far the most powerful tool for us last year.
The comment that I get from customers and prospects is, well, we don't want to spam. We don't want to spam people. And so, we feel like once a week is probably too much. And when you look at this chart here on the right-hand corner, frequency of outreach, 30% of wineries reach out monthly, full 30%, 23 biweekly, 17% reach out quarterly. And, so it's the worry about spam. But can you guys talk about the difference between engagement and spamming?
I mean, one of the best things about email marketing is people tell you if they don't want the content. They don't open, they don't click, they unsubscribe. So pretty fast if you're not, if either you're going too frequently or you're not delivering a message that resonates. And it's all about trying it, doing those A/B tests, finding the right language and providing the right message and design.
Yeah, I had an example that happened to me recently outside of the wine industry. It's a well-known DTC shoe retailer. And I purchased for the first time, submitted my email address. So I was waiting to receive my order. And I think between the time I placed my order and the time it arrived, I had received maybe 4 promotional emails from them, which I didn't open because I was still waiting to get my pair of shoes. So I think this is just a good illustration of why it's really important to look at segmentation based on customer behavior and where they are. And I would even say, we had set up a welcome campaign for people once they signed up to join our mailing list. And we realized we need to have it be different based on whether that customer came to us the first time through the tasting room versus if they signed up online. So if somebody submitted their email address after they were just in the tasting room and bought X bottles of wine, well, let's let's acknowledge that they signed up and we'll send them their initial confirmation, but we're going to wait to try to push the sale maybe 2-3 weeks out, give them a chance to enjoy their wine, look at what they purchased, look at the bottle price that they purchased. And so for us, it's really looking at the customer based on their behavior and what they've done and trying to be relevant based on what we're seeing.
Janiene, you're speaking my love language here. So segmentation, customer journey, different entry points. I love it. This is language, by the way, that is not just Janiene saying, it's not just Aileen saying it, but it's Dan Petrowski at Massican, who's making wine and running his winery, owner operator. This is pervasive through the industry, Rob. This is why I think this trend isn't going away and that sales are going to continue to go up, because everyone is now speaking a common language, which is aligning with the rest of the world. We're finally catching up with the rest of the world in digital and e-commerce and open rates and retargeting and return on advertising spend and click through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think we have an open rate slide, 13.
Nice.
Since you mentioned it, I can't take credit for this, and I wish I remember who mentioned this in a conference last year, because a lot of times we just talk, what's your general open rate? And someone brought up something that I thought was really, really relevant is, as a business, you also need to look at your open rate in terms of what type of messaging you're sending out. So in our case, when we're sending out an email that our pool is reservations are going to open up, that's going to have a very, very high open rate. And I don't necessarily want to compare that against a promotional email campaign or an open rate when it comes to talking about a new event that's coming to our winery. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that we're still in the early stages of, is really looking at the metrics of our email campaign success and drilling down based on what's the right open rate based on, are they a club member? Are they not a club member? Are they a new register? Is there some people that haven't done any activity in a while and we're trying to get them back into the purchase flow? So I think that's a good point for people to keep in mind.
I love that. This, looking at a homogeneous number versus the specificity of what means something to your business. If you're sending out a content email versus a conversion email, and unsubscribes based upon the different factors, because you're building sophistication into your model. A lot of people asked about in the Q&A about SMS text messaging. It's something we haven't addressed. So maybe you can lead the way there, Janiene, and then follow up with Aileen.
Well, I'll say we're definitely in the early stages of that. A few years ago, we sent out a survey to some of our club members asking if they were open to text messages, and they were. So based on those survey respondents, we started using it specifically for events that were happening back when we could do events, and had success with that. So I think we still have a long way to go with experimentation. I think it's a great tool when you're trying to track a package or an order. Everybody knows how frustrating it can be to be a wine consumer waiting for your order to show up. So I'm definitely looking forward to experimenting more with that.
Yeah, we're definitely at the starting point as well. We started using it for hospitality confirmations. And currently that's the only way we're using it, but it's top of my list for 2021 to do some outreach, find if our club especially is interested in receiving text messages, specifically because of reports like this that are showing how powerful it is and how it's kind of then the next frontier beyond email marketing.
So the question that is asked, and I think it's kind of the one that's sitting, the obvious one in the room is where do we go? What do things look like in the future? And it's pretty clear to me that the pandemic has accelerated change in a lot of ways. And so, when it comes to sales, we can't put the genie back in the bottle, and where I want to see things go is to a place where we start managing at the consumer level, at the customer level. And so, as example, when let's say I went onto a website and the website recognized me and said, "Oh, you're in the club." And it knows last time, you bought a case of Chardonnay, and, would you like a case of Pinot Noir? Or, you bought 12 bottles, maybe, you'd like 3 bottles, but, we're not quite there. We're definitely not there, but it's the way that retail's handled, elsewhere for sure. And so, how do we get there? I think slide 11 is probably one Paul will speak to, but the kind of digital marketing investments, and I didn't do enough actually to emphasize email, because everybody does email, and so I think we left out a lot of email kind of comments, but in terms of direct investment. But this is an interesting one to me, because I think for us to actually change into more of a digital business, and I'm not saying we become digital. That's not the point. It's omnichannel. It's attacking that customer from many different angles, right? It's being able to find them, wherever they are and however they communicate. So I like the slide, because that middle one says 28% of respondents said they're going to engage an outside consultant, recognizing they don't have the internal depth of knowledge to be able to do what they really can envision. And then and right below that, hire dedicated digital marketing person. Paul, you probably have some thoughts on this one, huh?
Look, digital is a big word. It's a big word. It means sales and marketing. It means tools to help you communicate. It means tools to make you more efficient. So it's a lot to do. I do think that we're seeing a huge investment in it, but the people that know how to do it can be very successful. And I'll give you an anecdotal case story. Justin Nolan, who recently moved over to lead digital at Treasury, was recently at a company, and they did some digital experiments where they're testing what kind of consumers responded to different brands, and launched a celebrity brand called One Brick Wines, all DTC, all online, 20,000 cases in 60 days. Wow. I mean, think about that. And I think the average SRP is between $20 and $30. So it's a little lower priced wine, but that's a pretty explosive growth that they can do using the right tools, using the right targeting, attracting the right customers, matching the right talent up. It is a bit of a celebrity brand, so that does help, but it's not like a tier 1 celebrity. It's not Snoop Dogg with Treasury. But I know that Aileen and Janiene are both looking at different systems all the time now. I mean, that's part of the process. And the limitations of some of the growth is coming from systems as well. There's some pretty terrible systems out there that we've kind of gotten addicted to, or we're stuck into. It's hard to break free of them as well. And I know a lot of people are also trying to break out of wine, investing in big systems that they haven't been able to actually execute, so it's a challenging time, but a good time.
And Paul, you put, what's the vendor flywheel?
Yeah. Every year we do the vendor flywheel for you. You actually made me do it, I think 4 years ago. You said, hey, tell me who all the DTC vendors are. And so we put them into an organizational structure of all the way from the back end systems, all the way to the front, and every consultant in between, to try to help, navigate this crazy time. And hopefully it gives some guidance. I think it's at the end of this PowerPoint here, if you guys want to use it. There's a blog post, but it has all the different vendors from fulfillment, to e-commerce and point of sale system, and every year we update it. So this year hopefully we're going to try to put rating systems on it based upon actual feedback from users like Janiene and Aileen, like which vendors do you like, which ones do you love and not love, so that way we can help people and guide them. So
this isn't a vetted recommendation list.
Okay.
This is it's trying to be inclusive of
Everyone.
Everything, and segment it in a way that people can look at this and say, oh, okay, well, here's what I need.
That's right.
And right now it's, there's no links attached, so it's going to take a little bit of work. But for those people that are watching, and we got this question a lot, is, what platforms do you use? Who do we, who can we talk to? So, I mean, the desire is there to be better, and as we saw in the last slide, to make digital investments.
Right. It's an objective, inventory, trying to organize them into different buckets of activities and hopefully help people make decisions to pick your own stack on that one, to pick the ones you like.
And I just have a public service announcement to add to to people to keep in mind while they're making that decision-making process. You know, I think it's very easy to get caught up in what's the perfect solution for you, or being afraid of leaving the devil you know for the devil you don't know. It's not just a question of your monetary investment. You need to be ready to invest the time from your people, from different levels of the organization. You know, we had invested in a CDP a couple of years ago, and it was great, but I will tell you, it was a lot of work to set it up. And once it's set up, which is great, it's not, the money doesn't just appear magically. You really have to interact with the system, and you also need to share the data internally too. I think for us, we kind of a magic turning point was when we got people outside of DTC interested in the first party data that we have, because DTC is such a great kind of experimental playground when it comes to, you know, people trying to decide what's some good information to show potential retailers that are trying to sell a wine brand into based on the location. And, you know, if you're in DTC, you have very important data that is very valuable to the rest of the organization.
For sure. That's the reason for DTC. That's why Nike is 40% DTC at this point. It's the data feedback loop. Also, I think to follow up on your point, Janiene, these systems, once you buy them, it's not like you buy them and you leave them away. It's like a car. You keep upgrading them, you keep investing in. It's a total cost of ownership in perpetuity. Everything you do in digital now becomes, you know, a cost center, right? Whether email, whether it's, you know, and it continues to grow as a cost center as your success rates. And I think that's something we forget. The website itself, it shouldn't be a once and done. It should be an always living, breathing organization. How often do you change your content, Aileen, on your website?
Almost daily, certainly weekly.
Wow, look at that.
But that's everything from updating hours to new wine releases, but it's definitely a living, breathing place for our customers. And one of the questions that really, you know, struck home to me was about what do small and medium-sized wineries do? We're small. We make about 10,000 cases. And so really finding the right partners who not only have tools that will work for you, but also will support you and help you learn. I'd never done email marketing before this role. And so really leaned on partners to find, you know, what's the right way to do this? What's the right way to test? How can I make sure we're being effective? And it takes a lot of time, but really pushing anyone that you are signing up with to really fully support and train, I think is really critical.
Yeah, no, I would love to go to slide 18 and talk about Wine Club. If you don't jump to kind of some traditional stuff.
You are reading my mind, sir.
Oh, yeah. By the way, Aileen, that was my love language as well. So just say thank you on that one. I mean, because, yeah. So tell me about what's going on with your clubs this year and your thoughts on that, starting with you, Aileen.
Yeah, so I think similar to many of the people who responded, retention was the new conversion in 2020. So we saw huge jumps in our club members really sticking with us, really supporting us. You know, a stat that really stood out to me, club members are about 5% of our annual consumer base. But in 2020, they made up almost a third of our revenue. They were the folks who were, you know, coming onto all the virtual tastings with us. They were buying wine online. They were buying our Thanksgiving pack. So they became even more valuable. And what we found is that with the lack of, you know, person-to-person engagement in the tasting room, even though we reopened in June and were able, thankfully, to stay open from that point on, we just weren't getting the conversions. And so we looked at, one of the things we learned from a virtual tasting series was this interest in the broader category of Virginia wine. And so we launched a new wine club at the end of 2020, and we're able to fill it, you know, very, very quickly, and now have these two different clubs with different offerings for, you know, two different consumer sets. So that was how we were able to grow.
What was the new club? What was the difference?
So our core club was all about early mountain wine. The other club, I'm sourcing from other Virginia winemakers. And so it's called Taste of Virginia. And it's, you know, 6 small batch experimental wines every 6 months. as opposed to strictly early mountain wines.
Yeah, so I love that because it's the nature of collaboration. So, you know, it's one thing to be in an established region like Napa, and there's a lot of, obviously, there's a lot of collaboration in Napa too. But you know, when you're in a less evolved region, you know, it's how you grow. It's how Napa grew, is by pulling together and helping each other. And I think you actually talked about Aileen, some marketing things that you started doing together, right? Beyond that club.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, beyond the tastings, one of the things that's fantastic is the Wine Marketing Board, as well as Virginia Tourism, puts out grants that require wineries to band together. We're already doing it anyway from a learning standpoint. So we've done everything from highlighting road tripping through Virginia wine country, through video and video ads, to we're going to do a program where a bunch of winemakers are going together to New York in the spring of 2022. That's supported by government money as well from the state.
And sadly, in this slide this year, we didn't have New York or Virginia. And so as an encouragement, I'd like to, we weren't able to, we didn't have enough responses from Virginia or New York to include their breakout. So we'd like to encourage you guys that are in New York and Virginia to participate when you can, please.
And especially small wineries. I'm such a fangirl of these reports because they give such powerful data that we don't always have access to. So
yeah, thank you. And you know, it's free. So, but there is responsibility. You know, the Silicon Valley Bank spends a lot of time and money and effort to try to put this out for the industry. It's the way we give back, but we can't. It's partnership. We can't do it without help. By the way, I think it was slide 24. Just going back to that slide for a second. If you participate in the survey, you get all of the data. It's anonymized, so nobody can tell, you know, who's answering what. But you could take this conversion by visitation model, and you could, you know, break it out in any number of ways that you might like, and you know, against the other questions. So you know, it's something to just play with and you know, discover for yourself. So just an encouragement to participate next time. Back on the growth in attrition rates, let's go to slide 22 for a second. Because I think there's a little bit of an interesting story here. It's a little bit of a reflection of, you know, of what we saw. So you can see the growth rate, and that's the green bars for 2020. This is the 21 survey, but it's the 2020 information. And you know, obviously the numbers are off, but there's other stories to tell on this. When the pandemic hit and we closed everything, the question that was asked overwhelmingly was, oh my God, you know, it's not just the tasting rooms. This is how we get all of our club members. And I think you see that in this slide. It's because of that over focus on club members. But, you know, what's the solution if you can't get your members via walk-in, via your tasting room?
Yeah,
Panel?
We definitely were happy to, when everything first happened, well, we didn't know how long it was going to happen, but that initial knee-jerk reaction was, oh my goodness, how are we going to retain our existing members, because we know we're not going to be able to sign up what we had in the plan. And so a lot of that was just retention efforts, you know, whether it was, you know, preferential shipping, or, you know, hey, for our pickup members, we will ship you your order at no additional cost because we know that you can't come to the winery. One thing that was surprising to us, the attrition that we had in terms of net numbers was less than we had actually put in our regular plan, which was interesting. And then the other thing that we were happy to see was we still have people signing up to join our club online. It was great because we thought, you know, what's the incentive? Because you don't know when you're going to be able to come back to the winery, but we did have an interest in people signing up
Yeah, that's slide 9.
Yeah.
That was pretty crazy, actually, to be honest with you. I think that was a strange phenomenon. I do wonder if that's also going to make you guys reconsider how to build clubs that touch people that are never getting a plane and come to the winery.
That's such a perfect segue, Paul. Because I think the other thing is the club model. It's based on a few different assumptions for a lot of wineries, including us. The model is based on the perks that you offer people who will be visiting your winery multiple times a year. It's going to appeal more to locals than it will to people that are out of state or maybe only going to come up to visit you once every 2 years, every 3 years, who knows? So the question is, is the club model outdated? I will say the club model works for a particular segment of people. Outside of the club model, there's something else you can look at, which is the subscription model, and that's really more about convenience and customization. So I think the club model is going to still be here to stay for your locals, your diehards, of course. So you're looking at adding some supplemental business, basically, is what I'm getting at. It's not either or. It's fruitful to look at a combination of both.
Yeah, and I like the slide. It's Commerce 7 did another bit of work on it, and the question was, what percentage of new club memberships did you get through digital means? And their answer was 17%, and the survey answer was 20%. So roughly within shooting distance of each other. So fascinating to see kind of the focus in the 25 to 100,000. That's where the the higher results were. And I think there's probably just a greater focus on that, on driving that. And back to Zoom tastings for a second. And the path of Zoom tasting, I feel the stages of men, from protoplasm to hunched over to standing up, walking tall, and that was kind of Zoom tastings. From being afraid, tasting a wine in front of a camera, not really having content, to by the end, I was talking to customers and prospects who were being very, very good at pulling in members via Zoom meetings. So for example, one that I talked to said that they would give free tastings free Zoom tastings for people that they were an evangelist effectively in the city, and so if somebody new came in, then that new person got free tastings. So they would have, instead of just those two people, if they could bring in others, then their friends would get like 6. And it's using those evangelists, using those people to spread that. I think that is the most viable way to grow a brand anywhere, is by getting that trusted friend to recommend an experience. And if you actually have your friend that is involved in a club, and that ends up being either digital or in-person socialization, it becomes really hard to leave, because if you leave, then you're leaving your friend beyond the product. So fascinating to see us each as an industry just rotate and discover this. Do you guys think that we're going to branch out even further and find new ways to get club members beyond Zoom? What are some of the other digital ways you guys might have seen success?
Well, I think there's a connection between the increase in reservation tastings and hospitality experiences and then this digital result. So we now follow up anyone who visits the tasting room, that's not a club member, offering them a chance to join. And that's where we've seen the biggest jump in those online signups. And so maybe the server didn't close the deal. They've been staying so much more distant from the tables and don't have a lot of interaction. But we're following up. They're sober the next day. They haven't drunk a couple of glasses of wine, so they're signing up with all seriousness of being very interested and wanting to stay in the club for a long time. So I think we're also seeing some of our numbers go up as far as average months in the club. We last year ended up about 30% online signups for club.
Anything new you're trying?
Well, the other thing I just wanted to mention too is we keep talking about virtual tastings, but there's a breadth of experiences that you can do virtually. I brought up the paint night experience earlier, but I've seen not just us, but other wineries too. You know, they bring in a culinary component to it. You know, preparing a recipe to enjoy some wines. You know, talking with the winemaker. People are doing things. Maybe it's not a formal tasting, but it's a Zoom happy hour that you have. We had one member last year. He was somebody that loved bringing people to the winery, and this kind of goes back to Rob's point. He scheduled, I want to say, half a dozen separate virtual tastings with different friends around the country because that was his way of keeping people together. So I think it's a great way to lean on your existing ambassadors as well as reach new consumers and stay engaged with people in a way that's beyond just going through a tasting. A virtual experience doesn't have to be, you know, taking your tasting sheet and reading off what you normally would at the bar. It could be something completely different.
I think
since we're back on Zoom tasting for a second, let's go to slide 10. It's one worth looking at. This was questions that we got from signups too. Is you know, wanting to understand pricing structure. So you know, another interesting thing for me. So how did people price? Now I have to say it was difficult to write the question for this year. It's a new question. Because you know we lack the experience, and so there's a huge diversity of offerings, but this is the way it kind of sorted out. So I thought it was really fascinating to see that, you know, people got to the point where, you know, they were charging up front for tastings, and it didn't always happen that way. You know, if you look down to the right side, even 5% had the same tasting fee, which is kind of interesting to me. I don't know how they got the wine in their hands for the price. But what was your experiences, you guys?
We did a hybrid. So for some, we had a bundle that we were selling, especially in the case of corporate tastings. But then we also wanted to make sure that we could address people that were buying our wine in the marketplace. And so if they had some wine that they already purchased from us, you know, we're happy they bought it from us wherever they bought it from us, right? So it's about continuing to engage them with the brand. So that was a service that we offered. I mean, going forward, us, like every other winery, we will have to revisit the pricing structure and the availability, because now we're also dealing with hosting people on property, right? So we'll need to put that into consideration of what makes sense as far as dividing up the time of our teams and kind of curating that experience.
Yeah, we did a hybrid as well, but we did not charge any pure per person fee, because in so many ways it was already an ideal situation. If people were buying our wines, they were bringing friends together or bringing their employee group or clients together, and we were able directly to those people to tell our story. So we just found that kind of setting a minimum wine purchase across the group was a good, effective way to make sure we weren't wasting our time, but that it really felt like a nice service that we were providing.
The one thing that's in here is shipping discounts included, and we had a little discussion on that yesterday, because one of the things that and by the way, you guys didn't miss another meeting yesterday. That was our pre-production meeting where we got together just to talk. That's why we keep referring to yesterday. But you know, in this case, shipping discounts, we had a discussion about that yesterday, which I thought was pretty good, because when this pandemic started, it's hard to remember, but we were in an position of acute oversupply. And the lower priced wines, the higher production wines, they got fixed first because of channel shifting into grocery. You know, that kind of cleaned that up. But the wineries that didn't have that 3-tier distribution were kind of stuck trying to figure out how to move forward, and especially early on, shipping just got, you know, it was like free shipping across the board. That seemed like the thing that that was out there, and I'm kind of wondering if we're able to put that back in the bottle. It's an expectation from consumers now, the Amazon model, but can we put that back in the bottle? What do you guys think?
I think you can if you are making incremental steps and experimenting. I'll be the first to admit we did penny shipping very frequently before the pandemic, and we're kind of moving towards, okay, let's see what it looks like with $5 shipping or $10 flat rate shipping, or focus on a 2-day flat rate shipping offer so that it kind of helps with the convenience factor of people getting their wine quicker. So that's something that we're still going to be dealing with. And the other thing too is, you think about the influx of new customers that a lot of us received last year, shifting into the online wine channel. So my proposal to people would be to experiment with those customers that are coming to you for the first time, and don't offer them penny shipping right off the bat. You can kind of see, start with those flat rate deals instead of training them to expect the penny shipping, and maybe that can help you shift away from that free shipping model.
I think that shipping is a really interesting phenomenon. I think Aileen spoke about it yesterday, which is, we know that it's the better trigger than a deep discount for sure. And we all know that actually functionally taps the psychology of a consumer. But I personally believe that we should start to try to avoid chasing the Amazon model, because we'll lose. We don't have the same resources or commodities to do that. I mean, you can bake into your price. That's one thing that people do. But how can we do a better job with better service? I mean, the consumers are really affected by getting wine that's hot, or as I said, the yellow stickers on your door. Nothing makes you more upset than that. Or an older a cohort, a baby boomer trying to carry 2 cases into their car from their office. That's not an optimal experience either. I think there's a lot of things we should really examine in the shipping category about how to give better service in that piece. They'll pay them for a service. They'll pay for a premium for service.
Aileen, talk about your approach to shipping costs.
Yeah, so it's definitely, we have a flat rate shipping, and on a whole, the majority of our customers are in, DC, Virginia, Maryland area, Florida, New York. We do ship to 24 states, but the majority. So they're getting the wine within 1 to 2 days. And we just found that free shipping was by far the most powerful mechanism. And we offered it on 3+ bottles at the start of the pandemic, and then looked at purchasing behavior. People were buying just under 6. So we moved it up to on 6 bottles, and are seeing people now, order up. And I think, it's about looking at the data, knowing how much the true cost is for you, which we figured out to be about $4 a bottle on average. And we work it into some of our pricing. So if we're putting together a bundle that's for Mother's Day, for example, work some of the shipping into it and offer complimentary shipping. And that seems to really satisfy what the customer is looking for.
Why don't we just shift just a notch, and let's look at slide 20. This is a slide you can go in a lot of different directions from, but it's it's kind of become at this point more of a classic metric to benchmark by. This is a regional benchmark. You could do it. As a matter of fact, the deck that respondents get will have case size, price point, all sorts of different ones. Again, encouraging you to participate because you get a different deck. But it's interesting to me to see that I think everybody experienced the same thing, which was consumers who didn't opt out of the club. At first, there was some, I think, the spring shipments in particular, there was some opt-outs. I think it was fear-based, if nothing else. But it wasn't as bad as I thought. And as a matter of fact, remembering at the time all of that hoarding that was pantry stuffing, if you wanted to call it that, at a grocery stores, people were looking for other wines, that they're stuck at home, they can't leave, at least I can have, the wine that I want, delivered to my door. And I think that it got a little stickier from that standpoint. You can see, kind of a little bit, the went from 31 to 32 months. So that's a little bit of improvement. How do you guys think about this this metric? Do you guys measure months? I mean, in the end, it's months, it's average spend, and between those two, that's the way to, it's things you got to measure to be successful. But how do you guys think about it?
Well, I think for us, on top of the traditional models that we're looking at, is looking at things like predicted average future value, which is something that we were able to do once we improved some of our back-end systems a couple of years ago. For us, for so long, and I'm sure a lot of other wineries are in the same boat, there was this number that we were chasing for the total number of memberships that we wanted in our club. And we did some deep digging a few years ago and realized, well, one, the number was inflated because there were several people that were not taking their shipments. So we actually had to do a cleanup of that. And, are we asking for the right shipment purchase amount based on all the other perks that we're giving them? And so we had to kind of make a seismic shift and increase the pricing of our shipment model, especially for our 4-bottle club, which was the most popular one. And we lost members out of that, but in the long run, it helped us build our average future value of those club members, because everybody knows, I mean, the club model, those customers, they are loyal, but they are also very high touch on property and off property. So I think if you have a way where you can look at, based on past behavior, when, are they just buying the club shipment and then that's it? Are they buying in other channels? And then also seeing at what point may they drop out based on their behavior, and try to do kind of an intervention.
So zero in on that last point is where I was hoping somebody would go, is predictive behavior. So, you figure by looking at your data that at a certain point, somebody is more likely to drop out of a club. How do you figure that out? How does somebody actually get to that?
So we had to go to an outside company to kind of deal, and there's several, including Paul's. We have a couple different things in our tech stack. So what we have one system where it loaded in 5 years worth of prior data, and it used that to determine what the algorithm would be for when somebody might drop out. And based on that, we're able to trigger email campaigns based on when someone's going to fall into that category. And so it might be, thank you so much for being a member. We just want to give you a little something extra special. Here's an extra 5% off. Definitely have a deadline attached to it so that they use it. And we have very high open rates and conversion rates from those emails. So, maybe it only postpones them dropping out of the club by another shipment or two, but it definitely helps.
And by the way, the chart's not in this deck, but it's in the larger deck, that the opening, the click rates and the opening rates, interestingly, are better with smaller, high price wineries or larger wineries that have a little bit more to spend on investment in systems. So it's not that, it's not that you have to be big in order to think through this stuff, because the opening and click rates are there for the small winery too. But it's trying to dig into it anyways and figure out how to be predictive. Some of the stuff you can figure out with Excel. Paul, you have to have some thoughts on this.
Look, predictive analytics are fun exercises. We have that our analytics that we give away for free to everyone. But it's like the house. It's you're predicting a group of people, and sometimes you're wrong, right? Like you're playing in Vegas. Sometimes someone will win a hand, but over time the machine can help determine the most thing. But you have to do something about it. And I think Janine's point is the most relevant, which is, what is the intervention? What is the thing you're asking the customer to do to stay one more time or to continue? Because I think one of the things we've learned, or the two things we've learned from the pandemic really strongly, is that retention is the new acquisition. We have to build better mousetraps to keep the customers that have already gotten a plane and come to our wineries, or even the ones that have joined our wine club. It's really important, and an extra shipment out of them requires us to understand them better, to think about them, and to give a better value exchange. And Janiene was saying that clearly with that, and so was Aileen. And the other thing is experimentation. what works for one customer group doesn't work for another. What works for one winery doesn't work for another. You know, people are asking questions like, what's the right email tempo to send? Well, it depends. And I know that sounds like a cop-out answer, but I know that Aileen and Janiene won't have an exact answer for that too, because even within their own winery, it depends on the customer group. It depends on the activity you're trying to get them to do. It depends. So that's really interesting. The, you know, experimentation and retention is the new acquisition.
Aileen, you probably have some thoughts about predictive approaches on this.
We are just starting to delve into trying to be more predictive, working with a vendor who's analyzing some of our data, but it's brand new for us because we're smaller, because we know many of our members, in some cases, you know, very personally. I feel like it's more about that one-to-one conversation that is not the most efficient always. And so looking to layer on some added efficiencies to hopefully get ahead of those members who might be on their way out. So
I'd love to.
I might call up Janiene after this call to compare notes.
You know, it's interesting that I think one thing that we have to learn in the predictive analytics piece and also in this piece is it's not always an intervention based upon an offer. We're so used to sending offers to people. Sometimes just reaching out to them is that outward, you know, external behavior change that will, you know, keep them there. Hey, I'm thinking about you. How's everything going? Keeps them in the consideration set that like, oh, I do like that winery, or I remember that time I went there, or whatever the pieces are fundamental. I think that we have to learn how to get into, and both of you do a great job. It's not every email is about an offer. Not every communication is about a discount. That's a learning too for our industry in a big way, everything we've done. And if you look back at the email charts, and we don't have to go back there, you know, 47% of the people either send one email a month or one email a quarter. That's crazy. I can't even imagine that in this day and age. You know, there's lots of things as a winery to talk about between once every 3 months or once a month.
You know, we're blessed as an industry to be both beautiful and always having new things, be it out in the vineyard or in the winery or new releases.
Yeah,
There's
we're
a lot
part
to
of time. We're tapped into time both forwards and backwards, by the way. You know, opening an old bottle is like a time capsule, right? So, I mean, it's pretty magical. We forget that sometimes.
How do you know, how do you guys get content and stay fresh so that, you know, those emails, those connecting points, how do you think about that? So part of it's content and part of it's delivery. There's, you know, there's more ways to have content than just an email. There's video. There's how do you guys think about that, and how do you stay fresh instead of saying, you know, it's Valentine's Day?
We lean a lot on our inside talent. I mean, we have a couple of different things going on at the winery. So we have an on-site restaurant, we have a culinary garden. So we're very grateful to have our culinary director to lean on when it's either creating videos that we'll do on Facebook Live or helping us put together recipes to share. We have a great bit team that's really good about internally sending us messages about what's going on in the vineyard. And so we'll lean on that and say, hey, that sounds like something that our customers want to learn about too. So let's work that in. And we have a couple other, you know, companies that are related to us within our umbrella company. So this is what's happening in Belize or Guatemala, or this is what's happening at our cafe in San Francisco. So we kind of look at it as through like a lifestyle lens. It's not all about what particular bottle that we're pushing out this week.
Yes, similarly, we started, this is going back probably 2 years ago, a monthly competition amongst our team to submit photos, which just really got people in the habit then of snapping that beautiful shot and sharing it. So definitely rely a lot on our team members and a lot on our customers too. I mean, people take gorgeous shots when they're visiting, they tag us. We want to be engaging with them anyway. And especially as we made a push to show more diversity of consumers who are coming to visit us, relying on user content was a really powerful, fast, genuine way to do that. And then it's all about curation of it and making sure that the images are consistent and on brand. And then, you know, we of course work with some fantastic professional photographers too.
We got a lot of questions about telemarketing. Can you both kind of lean into that if you don't mind? Tell us what's going on with you guys telemarketing wise and what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've had telemarketing built into our e-commerce department for quite some time. I want to say at least from 2014. So we have a couple of rock stars in our team that are continuing those relationships. They work very closely with a lot of our corporate consumers, and then with just different club members that they've built relationships with over time. So a lot of times it's just kind of aligning with them on, you know, what offers, you know, we want to push. Are there certain wines that we definitely want to kind of move through? And then just, you know, based on those individual relationships with the corporate order, you know, what seems like the right mix for them. What are some add-ons that we can do to kind of sweeten the deal? So we're very fortunate.
Yeah, our efforts, I'd say we're at the very, very start of, have been more ad hoc focused towards club members, as we had things that we knew were personally of interest to them. But we actually transitioned our club management role away from being tasting room based to be digitally based. And so we're actually right now analyzing all of the online purchasers over the last year, looking at their behavior, seeing who are possible club members, and are starting some outreach to them.
We're down to about 10 minutes left. I think I want to move to slide 8. Maybe we'll finish on this conversation. But you know, this is interesting to me because when I talk to wineries, they say, you know, oh, you know, we're fully digital, and you know, when you look through this is what they really mean is that, you know, they do social media. And Paul, you have, I'm sure, thoughts on search engine optimization, all the other things that I'm not very good at.
I think there's a difference in a business between being digital and digitizing your business, right? And digitizing is obviously putting things on the web, but digital is a cultural shift that ties to how you're leaning into the tools and the places to touch customers. I think you hear very strongly from both Janiene and Aileen about how they talk about it. And I would really love to unravel, you know, maybe also in the last 8 minutes is like, how was their experience getting into digital? How did that transform you guys? I mean, were you built for it beforehand? Did you jump into it? What forced you did you do? Because I think a lot of wineries had a fingertip in digital and they were digitizing something, right? We had a website that's good enough. We use email. We have a Facebook account, and that all changed as a result of COVID. So I'm going to let leading with Aileen and then closing with Janiene on that. Tell me about your COVID experience here a little bit, you know?
Yeah, so I think as a small winery,
aside from homeschooling and everything else, right? Yeah.
All right. Small winery, limited resources. I think the main thing is you don't need to do it all at once. You can try different things, see what works, see what is the best return, mostly on your own time, because that's so limited, you know, let alone money. And so as we were transitioning from this hospitality winery to an e-commerce winery, it was really just experimenting. And you know, of all these things, we don't have a data analyst. You know, we hadn't been doing text robustly, and just focused on making our website perform really well, really getting our email marketing working very, very effectively, social media and digital campaigns through social media, and just doing the best we could to look at the responses and the Google Analytics performance, getting our website. You know, we had a really high bounce rate, so really jumped in and figured that out. So I think it's just starting with what you have and then trying different things and seeing what's most impactful. I think this would be overwhelming for me to look at 14 months ago and say, oh my gosh, we're not doing all of these things. How do I even get started? You know, versus just the desperation and the time of, in some ways, that we were given because of COVID to experiment and figure it out.
Janiene.
Yeah, I love what Aileen was saying about kind of starting with what you have, because it can be very overwhelming. And as I mentioned before, when you start moving into these digital investments, it's not just an investment of money, it's also an investment of time. So for us, it has been a long journey, kind of building this over time. You're never done. You know, we have an internal DTC analyst / marketing manager, and that position started out as somebody that wrote our email copy, right? But that evolved over time as we started seeing the value of the first party data that we have, asking questions. You know, what are all of these anecdotes that we throw around? Like, for instance, you know, we start alienating wine club members if we send a promotion the month before they receive their club shipment. So it was a lot about testing that, and let's see if that's really true, and let's not be afraid to test and experiment. So it's not just a question of buying tools, moving forward with investments. It's also investing the time and developing the mindset that you need. You need people to be willing to be curious and to experiment, fail fast, as Paul mentioned earlier. Just because something, and by the way, just because something fails once doesn't mean it's going to fail the second, third, or fourth time, right? You know, there's all these other outside factors that that happen. So just because it didn't resonate with that one customer at that particular time doesn't mean it won't resonate 2 weeks later. So I think a lot of this has to do with mindset and having that conversation, and just whatever data you do have, kind of evangelizing that data with throughout your organization with your teams. It really helps when you have partnership outside of just your own DTC silo.
I think that's such a great point, Janiene. I mean, it's more about people and process than it is about programs. You have to start with the people and the processes first. And both of you leaned into the people, and it's about eating the elephant one bite at a time, right? That kind of, I think people think that you have to do all these things at once. It's one step, you know, crawl, walk, run with every seat. And if you start with the foundational pieces, e-commerce and email, then you can get better at each step of the way, right? I think those are the baselines.
But if you're going to move into digital, you know, I struggle with understanding it all, and or even talking about it for that matter. Yeah. And so you wouldn't want to promote me to you know, a job that would, you know, if I was, let's just say, you know, the tasting room manager, and I, you know, knew how to do some certain things in the tasting room, you wouldn't want to put me in charge of digital if that digital was just a starting point of social media. For us to move forward, we've got to bring in fresh talent. We have to bring in people from outside. And you know, I think you can get help from that long list of that we saw, that the vendor flywheel, I think, that Paul put up earlier. You can find some help in there, but it is about people. It's about culture and change, and I think that's you know, the path that we have to move toward. Bringing in the people changes the minds, changes the direction, and you know, to kind of wrap up, you know, we're at a point now of change. The tasting room model is proven to be, you know, not the total solution. You know, the future is about omnichannel. Paul, do you have a point?
It's brittle, right? That's what we used to call it. The tasting room model is brittle, and it's going to be brittle for all of us. I mean, the reality is there's going to be fires again, sadly, you know, when smoking it out, and, you know, all these different challenges. We've seen that. I mean, Janiene, you guys had to close down for fires, didn't you?
In Oregon, in Geyserville, yes. Four times. Yeah. Yeah.
When that's not, who knows what else? Brownouts, you know, zombie apocalypse. You know, what's next after the pandemic? We'll
don't ask that, Paul.
Locusts. Yeah. You know.
Right.
There is a point to spreading risk, and you know, you're all in one place, as we've discovered. It, you know, it becomes more difficult. So that you know, that's a way to get better. But even more so, I just have believed for a very, very long time that asking people to come to your tasting room and that's where the cash register is the wrong approach. It's an approach, it's part of it, but we have to be better at omnichannel. We have to be better at linking that consumer up through all those channels. And I think it's a long way to go, but it's clearly the path that we have to get on. You know, this is National Wine Day, and I'd love to say that overall demand is higher. I've expected it to go up, and you know, I've blogged. I know you guys read my blog. I've been very open about my belief that we'll have a party effectively, and that we'd see wine move up. And I certainly, you know, as we reopen, we'll see improvements in tasting room. But I think we'll see, you know, a return, not necessarily to the total mean, but like online, some of the things that actually increased this last go around may fall back a little bit, because right now still wine growth is basically zero. As much as I'd like to say otherwise, it's zero, and we're losing market share to spirits. Spirits are doing a much better job than we are in marketing. So it's not just all this stuff that we've talked about in direct to consumer, but the tide isn't rising. I've been working in the background with a few other individuals to figure out how to create a marketing organization of some part for wine, because we've got to push back on negative health messaging that doesn't include the other side of the story about the positive health aspects of wine, and that can't be done by a permit holder. But beyond that, we've got to, get wine to the place where it is something that's going to be accepted by this new consumer, and so that's something I've been working on in the background. Tomorrow, I believe, is going to be a really great spot for the wine business to be in. We have a new consumer group, the millennials, that's coming up, and we need to do what we can to figure out how to market and adapt to the way that they communicate through many of the things that we've talked about in this video cast. I'd like to thank all of my panelists. Aileen Sevier from Early Mountain, our first person from Virginia to be here. Janiene Ullrich, direct consumer from the family Coppola. Paul Mabray, CEO of Pix. Thank you guys for participating, and I'm grateful for that. Final thoughts. If you're interested in participating in the State of the Industry or the DTC survey, please express your interest in the survey at the end of this event. As a reminder, you can access the slides used today and a much lengthier direct-to-consumer wine survey report on our website at svb.com. A replay of this virtual event will be available next week and emailed out to all attendees and registrants. So thank you for joining us. And with that, I'll just say I hope to see you live and in person at Silicon Valley Bank someday.
Thank you.
Thank you.